Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the CHCI session on unlocking opportunity for future generations. My name is Sasha Frausto, and I am the College Programs Manager at CHCI. And on behalf of CHCI, I would like to thank the Walton Family Foundation for their generous support of this session. Before we begin our panel, it is my distinct privilege to welcome our panel host, Congresswoman Xochitl Torres Small, our session sponsor, Walton Family Foundation's Carol Stern, and our moderator, Nicola Acevedo. Congresswoman Torres Small represents New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District, whose district is larger than the entire state of Florida. It includes Las Cruces, Roswell, and parts of Albuquerque. Torres Small is very focused on tackling the unique issues facing rural communities like those in southern New Mexico, including healthcare accessibility, infrastructure development, and job growth. Congresswoman Torres Small serves on 3 House committees: Armed Services, Homeland Security, and Agriculture. It is also my distinct privilege to welcome our session sponsor, Walton Family Foundation, represented by its Executive Director, Carol Stern. A dynamic changemaker, Carol has dedicated her career to helping others through education, compassion, advocacy, and by rolling up her sleeves. This panel will bring together representatives from across several sectors to address these issues around unlocking opportunity. To help us moderate this important and timely session, we are delighted to have Nicola Acevedo, a reporter with NBC News Latino. From Puerto Rico's reconstruction process after Hurricane Maria and the island's financial crisis to politics, pop culture, and the coronavirus pandemic, Acevedo's reporting focuses on issues impacting Latino communities in the US, the Caribbean, and Latin America. I hope you enjoy the session, and don't forget to continue the conversation on social media, #CHCIHHM20. And now, without further ado, Congresswoman Torres Small.
Hi, Congresswoman Xochitl Torres Small here, proudly representing New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District. It is an honor to be here with you today as we work together to unlock opportunities for generations to come. Growing up in southern New Mexico, I know what it's like to feel like Washington and leadership doesn't understand us, to have to fight for opportunities and then to fight even harder to succeed. I'm here today as the first woman and the first person of color to represent my home in Congress because of those who put it all on the line to open doors: my family, my community, my friends, and my mentors. Because of this, I know how important it is for us to work together to ensure we continue to create opportunities and uplift one another. When I was first considering running for public office, I remember I was told that because I had questions, maybe I didn't want it enough. But time and again, we have shown that when women and Latinos enter public office, we overwhelmingly support and advance principles of equality and fairness, the fundamentals of any democratic society. Each day, I'm grateful to work to represent my community and rebuild representation in a place that has long been forgotten. That's why I'm proud to continue the work to stand up for my community, working to expand access to health care, an issue that disproportionately impacts the Latinx community, creating good jobs so New Mexicans have the opportunity to continue to make this special place their home, and working across party lines to find points of entry for meaningful dialogue. Thank you for your commitment to this work and fighting for the common good. It is critical we continue to collaborate and use our skill sets to expand opportunities to succeed in higher education, building community, launching businesses, and working towards the betterment of our neighbors, our family, and our friends. I look forward to watching each one of you grow. I know many of our paths will cross again, and many of you will go on to do far greater things in the future. Thank you all for the work that you do.
Hi, I'm Carol Stern, Executive Director of the Walton Family Foundation. Thank you so much for joining today's discussion about opportunity for the next generation. The Walton Family Foundation is, at its core, a family-led foundation committed to increasing access to opportunity for people and communities. Multi-generational change is at the heart of what we do. Inspired by our founders, Sam and Helen Walton, our work is led today by their children, their grandchildren, and their spouses. And we know that we are stronger when experienced leaders learn from young leaders who bring fresh, bold thinking the bold thinking that's necessary to solve big problems. As the Millennial and Gen Z generations deal with big challenges, the most important thing we can do is give young Latinos access to the opportunity to succeed, access to high-quality education, and a healthier and more sustainable environment. We are learning that Millennials and Gen Zs are optimistic about their own prospects for the future, despite obstacles. Both generations believe if the basics are there and available to them, their hard work will enable them to succeed. We believe it's time to listen to the voices of young Latino leaders. We believe it's time because the social change our world needs is too big for any one generation to carry. The Walton Family Foundation is a proud sponsor of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. Again, I thank you for dedicating time out of your busy schedule to listen to this important conversation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nicola Acevedo. I am a reporter with NBC News Digital and NBC Latino, and I am so happy to be joining you guys today in this conference, which it's virtual this year, but we have an amazing lineup of panelists today. We're gonna be discussing, what it means to unlock opportunities nowadays, especially for young Latinos like myself, millennials, and Gen Zs. So I'm excited to present to you a great panel of experts that have a lot of amazing lived and acquired expertise on these fields, starting off with Kristen Soltis Anderson. Kristen, welcome. Kristen is the co-founder of Echelon Insights, which is an opinion and research and analytics firm. Next up, we have Angel Peña. Angel, welcome. Angel is a public lands consultant with Green Latinos, which is a nonprofit that works to make sure that Latinx communities are included in the decisions that come around public lands management. And we have also Evie Valencia. Evie, welcome. Evie is the chief of staff at 50 Can, which is an education nonprofit working to make sure that all kids have access to high quality education. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. I'm excited to start this conversation.
Well, thank you. Excited to be here. Kristen and Evie, exciting to be here with you.
And I'm going to start off with Kristen. Kristen, you're working on a really, really interesting research that we already had an opportunity to chat a little bit about, but it's around what does opportunity look like for millennials and Gen Z, especially Latinos, in this moment in time? From the research that you've done, what have you found so far?
Well, thanks so much for including me in this discussion. I'm so excited to be able to share a little bit about what we're finding in our research. A couple of weeks ago, did a survey of 2,000 members of the millennial generation, those born roughly 1980s to mid-1990s, and then 2,000 members of Generation Z, so starting mid-90s. And this included kids who are still in high school. Generation Z is not fully, they have not all turned 18 yet, but we still wanted to include them in the study. And what we found was really interesting because I think if you watch the news or, if you ask people, do you think the next generation will be better off? Typically these days, you will see a lot of doom and gloom headlines where they'll say, polls for the first time ever are showing people do not think the next generation will be better off than the last. But it turns out that's actually a belief that is more confined to older Americans who are worried about the kids these days than it is actually how young people see their own future and their own standing. In our research, we asked young people, do you believe that if you work hard, you'll be able to succeed in life? And 81% of people who are millennials and Gen Z said yes to that question. We asked, do you think you'll be better off in life than your parents were? And we found that not only is this true of a majority of young people, but it's particularly true of millennials and Gen Zers of color. Where 59% of Black millennials and Gen Zers, 57% of Hispanic Gen Zers and millennials, as well as 54% of Asian millennials and Gen Zers say yes, they think they're going to have a better life than their parents had. which does not mean that they think everything's going to be easy. In our survey, for instance, we find pretty high numbers of millennials of color saying that they have faced or expect to face things like racial discrimination and inequality. Many express that they think higher education costs too much. They worry that the environment is going to be worse off for their generation, even as so many other things they perceive to be getting better. They worry about the environment getting worse. So it's not all sunshine and roses, but I do find that for many young people, there's a recognition of a lot of progress that's been made, even over the course of their lifetimes. And there's a lot of confidence and optimism about the ability to overcome the hurdles that are in their way to unlock opportunity for the future.
And Kristen, is there a relationship that you guys found between their views on access to opportunity and maybe their views on the American dream, whatever that means now? Is there a relationship there that you guys found?
So it's a great question because, when we set out to do this research, we wondered, does the term American dream resonate with young people at all? Do they believe that it's possible to achieve? And so, as I mentioned, 8 in 10 say they think that if they work hard, they'll be able to succeed. A slightly lower number, but still about 2/3 of millennials and Gen-Zers say they believe they'll be able to achieve the American dream. But those two things are not necessarily identical. When we asked young people in our research how they define the American dream, what does it mean to live a better life? What does that term stand for them? A lot of them named things like they believe that they will be able to customize their own life, that they'll be able to have a better life because they're not going to be bound by some of the same restrictions or prejudices that perhaps their parents faced. It's now less about moving down a particular pathway and getting 3 steps closer to the finish line than your parents did, or growing a bank account. Now, certainly people in our survey did say that for them, the American dream is buying a big house, getting a nice car. There are still, material and financial well-being components to this. But another piece of it is less about what type of house or car or career do you have, and more, have you been able to build the life for yourself that you envisioned, whatever that means to you? If it means you want to travel a lot, if it means you want to live a lot of different places, if it means you want to pursue a career that maybe doesn't pay as much, but lets you do something you find fulfilling, whatever that looks like for you, that's what the American dream is. And I think that's very different than perceptions from past generations, which may have either looked at it in absolute terms of, the American dream means you owned a home. You had the white picket fence and the, 2.3 kids and the dog and the 2-car garage. I think something that's so strict and defined is not how most millennials or Gen Zers view things. But I also don't know that they view it in relative terms either, that it's just about, did I get further than my parents did? I think for many of them, it's, do I have more ability to make choices to craft the life that I want than my parents did? That really defines the American dream for so many.
Wow, yes. And I mean, we understand a little bit how this looks like from the point of view of millennials or even Gen Zs. But Evie, the path to get there, the way to actually get there, it's not always super straightforward, especially for many young people of color and Latinos. Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? How are you finding that the fact that we're seeing more and more that the path to success and access to opportunity is not necessarily linear? How are young people grappling with that?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is amazing. Kristen and Angel and Nicole, I'm really excited to dig into our conversation. A lot of really interesting things that Kristen just shared, and I'm really excited to hear more in coming weeks. But, I think all of this really resonates with Hispanics and Latinos because we understand that life doesn't look linear, right? We ascribe to this American dream, right? Like our previous generations that came over, we cross border, some of us, right? Not all of us, because we were very diverse in experience as well, but you come over, your parents work really hard, and if you go to school, you're going to get a college degree, and hopefully if your parents are anything like mine, they're like, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to make money, right? Like you're going to do the things that couldn't do. And let me tell you firsthand, I am not a doctor and I am not a lawyer, much to my parents' disappointment, but I don't think I've done that bad for myself, right? So absolutely, Nicole, it's not linear. And I think what Kristen is, raising here, and I'm sure Angel has experienced this in his own work, is that we as millennials, I identify as a millennial. In my role as chief of staff at 50CAN, doing education advocacy work, I have a whole network from Hawaii to Connecticut where I'm working with millennials. But I'm not only working with millennials, I'm working with our Gen-Zers and our Gen Xers and some baby boomers. And I end up being the translator of this American dream. And how do we function in a workplace, right? So it's allowed me to really become just a better listener, but also really diving into a lot of stories around okay, so if we have decided that the path to opportunity and success, right, under normal terms, right, this is all not even acknowledging the big elephant in the room that is COVID, right? We're living through a pandemic. This world, the world as we know it, is just not the case. And I hope we never go back to some parts of that, right? Because I really like working from my PJs. So that also opens up this whole new route of opportunity for us, right? Are we able to provide these opportunities for young people and Latinos to, if you want to follow the traditional track of, education, you can, right? You hope that any kid, our hope is that any kid, no matter where they live, has access to a high quality education. And now they should be able to access any school from the power of your computer, right? If you have a tablet, if the best STEM program in New York is in New York and I'm in Colorado, then that third grader better be able to tap into that STEM program and get what they need, because that's the world we're living in. And that's exciting, right? We are looking at learning and opportunity in the state, in this pandemic, just very differently, right? So I do think that there isn't a linear way to this anymore. There hasn't been for many generations. And as we're translating what these two battling generations in between us are doing, it's beautiful, right? Because there's so much tension and there's so much opportunity in that, because you have the Gen-Zers who are I don't know how you guys are even having this conversation about these really controversial topics. We're just on board, right? Get on board with us, right? And you have the Gen Xers who are telling us you guys take everything for granted. And there's a portion of me that agrees, right? When you, to Kristen's point, right? We can be all doom and gloom. And there are a lot of really intense things happening in our country, and a lot of issues that we really have to grapple with. But James Baldwin said, if I love this country, I also reserve the right to criticize it. And that is the beautiful moment we are in right now. And I think that's, we have generations as millennials and Gen Zers who literally can have anything at their fingertips and at their door in less than 48 hours if they wish. Our previous generations didn't have that. So how do we leverage that, right, as a community for just what opportunity and success can look like and should look like, and how do we leverage this pandemic for what, creating the tomorrows, right, right now. So that's I'll give Angel a chance to jump in here, but yes, thank you for that wonderful question, and excited to keep talking.
No, and I think you mentioned something that it's important to point out, which is, in terms of education, which is such an important thing when you're thinking about what are the tools I'm putting on my toolbox to make sure, I have all the resources I need to access opportunities and reach success. It's that when crises hit, those need to be rethought. And younger generations have been going through so many instances of crisis, from watching their parents live through the Great Recession, from natural disasters, now COVID-19.
So it seems like that adaptability, even though they may have other reasons to see the world in a doom and gloom kind of way, it's almost like, hey, if we made it through this, we can make it through anything. And in a way, Angel, I wanted to ask you, because I know you started your own organization last year. That sort of develops an initiative that can be a lot of times entrepreneurial, seeing an issue that you care about and doing something about it. And is that something that you as a young Latino experience yourself? Do you feel like you had the tools to go on that journey of starting your own organization?
Thank you, Nicola. Kristen, super inspiring to know that we're not the only ones out here hustling for a better tomorrow. So excited to learn more about that research as it continues to get rolled out. Miss Abby, I'm learning so much about your organization, especially in the recent weeks, and it always gets me fired up to hear you preach, and I love it. And so thank you for your work. Yes, relationships is everything. To me personally. Well, actually, before I dive into that, Miss Evie, my daughter, I asked her, it just popped into my head. I asked her last night, she's a Gen-Zer. And I go, where do millennials fall for you? And she goes, oh, you're the buffer zone between X and boomers and the Z. And she goes, or else we would have gone to battle already. And so when I heard you speaking, I just, I took a little note. But, to answer your question, I think for Latinos, Hispanos, Indio-Hispanos, I think this idea or notion of raza, of gente, of like family, is growing and is no longer in the family unit, but we're starting to see it now as we're getting older and enter the professional field. We're starting to see each other support one another. I couldn't do what I do. I couldn't be where I am today as a first generation Mexican American, having had the opportunity to make the jumps my family's been able to make. Would never have been able to do it without relationships, friends, and my gente really supporting me and pushing me up. That's why, like at Green Latinos, for example, we work every day to mobilize tables, right, of a diverse group of folks that are led by Latinos. So it's Latino ideas, Latino supported, without any other prerogative under it. So that's always exciting to be in this space and be working to develop as many access points as we can, because as gente, as raza, as we're growing, and as we're taking this next step into a new time, right? There's a number of paradigms that are shifting, and so I'm committed, and I'm most excited to work every day to create access points for as many of those next smarter, more energetic, and with a bigger vision to push us forward.
And Angel, you do a really interesting job with Green Latinos. It's this idea to make sure that our history, that our voices are included and they don't get erased when we're talking about public land management. I would have never thought about that. But that concept of history sort of like popped into my head, and I was like, how important it is to understand our place in history and our place, for many generations back, in order to empower younger generations to move forward, power through any crisis, and access opportunity and success.
No, absolutely. And public lands and waters are often seen as a defining feature of our nation's like shared character and tradition, right? And yet the systems and the policies have been rooted in oppression and racism, to be completely honest. And so over here at Green Latinos, of course, working with our partners, with our friends, we're trying to think a little different. We're trying to think of the New Deal for public lands and people, because historically we've always tried to compartmentalize natural resources and our traditions and our histories, and you just can't do that. My abuelito, he brought my family over the border, and we talk about public lands and waters often, right? It's what I do. I love to talk shop, especially with my family. And with him, I realized that he doesn't get public land conservation, right? For him, where he brought us over into this country from Chihuahua, from Juarez, Chihuahua, you look across the border into the United States and you see these mountains, Kastner Range. And for him, he's so passionate about his place because those mountains really didn't, for him at the time, click for clean air and clean water, but they clicked for opportunity, right? And those mountains stood as a symbol of being able to work hard and push your family forward. And so I think that's exciting stuff that we're diving into over here at Green Latinos and other partners like the Nuestra Tierra Conservation Project, who are working on the ground with experts, with local experts, but really to help code switch a little bit. We're saying the same thing, but we're using maybe just a little bit of different words. And it's again, exciting time because we're given the space, we're given the microphone, and really able to redefine things. So my little kids can just kind of pick up where we left off, and do bigger, better, more cooler, fun stuff for sure.
And Kristen, I wanted to go back to a point that you brought up earlier, and it's the ability that young people have to recognize that progress has been done, but there's still a lot of work to do. I think that we've seen a lot of that with young people really engaging more in protest since the Parkland shooting, and now this year with the Black Lives Matter movement protest, how does that translate when they're trying to seek opportunity? Their views that, recognizing that progress has been done, but much more needs to be done.
Yeah, I think you see that most strongly in our polling, in the finding that on the one hand, you find among millennials of color some of the highest percentages saying that things like encountering higher education that's too expensive has been a problem for them. Encountering racial discrimination has been a problem for them. That there are many things that are hurdles to opportunity that in particular millennials and Gen-Zers of color will say, yes, I have faced that. And yet at the same time, in the very same survey, it is those same millennials from communities of color and same Gen-Zers from communities of color who are saying, I believe that I will have a life better than my parents. I believe that if I work hard, I can succeed. I believe that the American dream is accessible to me. So again, you might at first glance think, well, isn't there a tension there? But no, what I think that means is there is an acknowledgement that things have improved, that the opportunities available to someone, we've been doing these qualitative exercises as well, where we ask people to post in these qual boards, which is kind of like a message board, about their thoughts. And one quote from our qual boards just from a couple of days ago was this quote that said, I think I will have a better life than my parents because I'm not bound by the same restrictions that my parents were set on. That they feel like, on the one hand, past generations, maybe some people had better opportunities, but now we're really having these honest conversations in our society and trying to say we need to open a lot of doors that have been there but have been closed or have had things blocking them for folks for a while. That the sky feels more like it's the limit for people today, which again is not to say that there aren't obstacles, but things like saying, look, we can make education better and make it more accessible to people. We can take something like clean air and water and the environment and really focus on it more and make a strong commitment to making it better. And we can do more to secure opportunity for us down the road. So I think that's where you get that interesting tension of both. This is not to say everything is great for our generation. We have a lot of hurdles to overcome, but we feel more confident than ever in ourselves to be able to use the tools and resources at our disposal to overcome them.
And Evie, no, go ahead, Angel.
I was just, when I was hearing about it, just personally, I feel like I have big boots to fill, right? That my parents took big risks and made big jumps to put my family where we are today. And so just personally and where I feel myself fit into that research or that data is just, I got big boots to fill, right? And so we have to, adelante, Didn't mean to jump in.
Oh no, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that's a sentiment that, especially, like, I think Evie also spoke to that sentiment a little bit earlier. It really fuels a lot of what we do, and honestly motivate young people to power through difficult situations. A lot of times, we're navigating the abuelos that we so much love, and maybe kids or younger siblings, so it's a tough boots, big boots to fill. But at the same time, I couldn't help think, that's such a powerful concept to think about. The fact that, young people have the ability to acknowledge progress, to acknowledge what happened in the past, learn from that, and then see what are the issues of today, have a more visionary vision, to be redundant, about the future, and come up with solutions to fix those. And is that what's happening right now? Like, our young people, when it comes to the education they receive, and the access to resources that they get, is that what's actually happening? Are we actually capitalizing on that ability that young people have? Evie, if you want to go first.
I sure hope so. If not, then we're missing a huge opportunity. And I think, if you just look at millennials, I'll speak for my people, right? Between us, right? Like, we are people who are in our 40s, right? Like, at that end. And then we have some that are still in their 20s. So now you have people who are, like you said before, right? Have lived through the financial crash, saw 9/11, are living through a pandemic, right? Like, somehow found ways to get employed, but also have reaped huge benefits from technology, and from, like, my iPhone can do amazing things, and I never want to give that up. But we also have, our generation, they're now parents, right? So some of us had like kids really young, and now they have like teenagers who are like, what is wrong with you? Like, why do you think that way? Right. And that's beautiful. And guess what? Now they can tweet at you, and they can tag you on Facebook, and they can DM you and tell you exactly how they're feeling, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and how you can make it better. And that's amazing, right? Whether we like it or not, like, there is no hiding how they feel and how we can like move forward. So I think that there is this really exciting time, and I keep saying exciting because, I mean, I don't know, it just is, right? Like, you have to be excited about it. It is also overwhelming, and there's a ton of work to do. But if you even just look at education, right? Like, before this pandemic, we had a system that largely depended on kids going to physical buildings. That is a very antiquated type of schooling, right? And if I'm listening to Angel, and I'm listening to, like, I get the ads, guys. I know that I can go learn anything off of Masterclass or even off of YouTube, right? Like, we are living in a time where learning is happening everywhere. And there's families right now in this pandemic who are like, okay, so the building goes away. What does education look like? Can I send them to Angel? If, of course, he's like COVID testing everybody, but could they learn about the environment and like water conservation with Angel in a small pod? Absolutely. They should be able to do that, right? It's just evolving right before our eyes, like right now. So I'm just so like really excited to see like what our charter schools are doing, what are, like how our traditional schools are pivoting. We've seen great movement even from our higher ed system. And, like, I know a lot of, really talented people who work in all of these systems. And as an old government head, right, I worked for a governor and advised him on all of this stuff. I know how we think. And it's been really exciting to see systems that would have normally begrudgingly like made incremental, like, but pretty slow changes over a long period of time, make huge leaps in months to be able to get students access. And that, when we talk about education, we talk about the economy, we talk about the wellness of families, we talk about like all of these things we're talking about are all interconnected, right? Like, we are talking about how the environment impacts us, the protests you're talking about. of course this generation is angry. They've never had to be without, right? Like back in my day, I was, I was like, oh, I want to be the first Latina to do X and run for office or do X, Y, and Z. Over the last 10 years, I am so proud to be a Coloradan and see a large number of Latinas and just Hispanos be represented in the legislature, right? So we are sometimes we just have to take a step back to say all right, where are we going? Because we have made a huge amount of progress and our systems are also catching up and we are creating new ones and new ways to think about this stuff right now. And everybody's kind of pitching in and it's going to be clunky for a while. But I think if you like your Peloton and you like that your favorite instructor uploads new little videos for you to jam to, why shouldn't learning be like that for everybody, right? And those are the little examples I think that we are learning from businesses. We're learning from each other that we're adapting into different spaces that maybe we hadn't seen before. So take a step.
And for instance, you just mentioned, the fact that we are a little bit more questioning what are the systems in place and the foundation that younger generations have to build off from to move ahead in life. What I'm gonna start with Kristen, then Angel, and then Evie. What are you guys seeing that it's missing? What's missing from our current systems that are not completely maximizing this potential that our younger people have?
So I think in our survey, we find that one of the most important ingredients that young people think is necessary for unlocking opportunity is a good education. So we had, 3/4 say that the public schools in my community are extremely or very important to enabling opportunity. But then things like higher education are one of the biggest challenges millennials and Gen-Zers face. They say it's too expensive or hard for them to access, and that's a big problem for them unlocking the full potential of the opportunity they could have. And within that, when we then are asking about other, sort of big challenges, what's standing in the way of you accessing opportunity, another big one is over a third say they feel like they weren't taught important life skills in their education. That there are things you need for career and for successful life that are maybe lacking in our K-12 system today. And there are big expectations for changing that. In our survey work, we do find that when they say, what should public schools really be focused on? They want to see a boost in the life and career skills that are being taught. So I think that's one area where we can do much better at providing students with the tools they need to go on and thrive once they graduate, to make sure that those schools they're in at the K-12 level are providing that important foundation so that they can go and pursue that American dream that, again, is not linear, as Evie said, that can go in any direction, that they can choose which direction they want to go, and they have the tools in their toolbox to build whatever future it is they want for themselves.
Angel or Evie, do you guys want to jump in?
I'll let Angel because he,
I was about to step out of the way. I was like, no, I'll let Miss Evie. She's always got knowledge to drop on me, for sure. So many thoughts. First, Evie, I can't believe there's millennials in their 20s. Like, what's up with that? And then when it comes to education, I think relationship building, I have seen just personally being out in the career world and even on Capitol Hill or in rural Utah, knowing how to be or build people skills or relationships would be critical, I think. When it comes to public land and how do we push our future generations forward, the first thing that comes to mind is workforce development. I think everybody from top to down, from governors to local nonprofits need to be intentional and deliberate about diversifying their workforce. If we're not mentoring, if we're not teaching, if we're not empowering our gente or raza to take that step and be their biggest champs, then we're shooting ourselves in the foot. So yeah, Miss Evie, I'm excited to hear what Miss Evie says.
It's a lot of pressure that Anit is putting on me, but I really agree with both you and Kristen, right? I think we're like in a really, we're positioned just demographically, right? Like if you look to the most diverse and most representative city in the United States, I'm sure someone's going to correct me, so I'm just going to be careful. I read this a while ago. So it's Las Vegas, right? Like if demographically, that is what the United States is going to look like in the next, I think, 20 years, maybe, because the browning of America is happening, guys. Like 1 in 3 kids, they're brown, right? Like whether we like it or not, that's happening right now, and I like it. But but what I think that means is that the approach to the way that the things that we value, right? Like a large portion of our conversation today has been, what does success actually look like? What are the pathways that we get sold that it actually looks like? Does that work? Like all of us have gone through it. Like I can tell, I was sharing with my panelists earlier, like, look, I'm not a doctor, but I went through K-12, I went to college, I did the things that I'm supposed to do, and I got opportunities because of the social network and the social capital that I was able to gain, right? As I like went back to those relationships, and those opportunities came because of that. So how are we creating that for our young people, and creating that between sectors, right? Like now there's this whole other sector, like you don't especially for when you have to work during college and you can't get an internship. How can that look differently, right? Like we spoke about, like, okay, so if you're at a financial firm and you're offering new courses for your entry level associate, can someone, can we start badging differently, right? Like so anyone can access. So like, can we have this more free flowing way for us to build social capital and social network that Kristen and those Angel spoke to, right? It's about those the hard skills and the soft skills. And like, how do we build relationships with each other? How do we build these connections between our systems and our structures so that we can better serve families and students, and ultimately, right, have a more free flowing and hopefully bring people more to the center, right? Like this generation that's coming after us. They have they have big hearts, right? Like they've never been without a lot of these things, and God bless them, right? Because we're a little jaded now, right? Like we had the boomers and the Gen Xers, and they kind of rubbed off on us in a lot of ways. And Gen Zers, like I love them because they're intense, right? Like they go from 0 to 100, and we can really garnish a lot of that energy and that spirit of like what they're bringing. They're like, why not? Why can't we do this? And this is the right thing to do. And there's not a ton of negotiation, but at least they bring us back to the table. So we're not so polarized and just the paths forward, right? So we are going to have this tension. So that's very long-winded. So I am like really excited to dive in to your next question, Nicole.
No, I'm gonna open it up to our the people watching us virtually. We have a question in from Marina. Marina's asking, can you speak on the myth of meritocracy and the real barriers young people face due to their race, the climate crisis, and socioeconomic status? Is there anybody that would like to kick off that one?
Or wait.
I guess I'll jump in just quickly. Yes, climate change has brought to light and just called out some real inequities that people of color have been living with since the beginning. And it's and I can't not say that the processes that we all have to work in right now are not set up for us Black, Indigenous, and people of color to really win and lead in this space, which is why Green Latinos is working every day to make sure that we're able to create access points for whoever and anybody who needs to be part of those conversations, like the experts on the ground, like the experts who just sent in the question, who are on the front lines, need to be these people also in the halls of Congress, sharing their stories, telling them what it's really like. Gosh, no, it's such a huge one. I think that's all I have for now, but that was a great question.
And I think, but both of you, three of you really mentioned, when we talk about meritocracy, it's sometimes, so barriers that are not up to us. Like a lot of it, it's like, if I cannot access a certain college, then does that mean I cannot access certain opportunities? And I think that that's why the people power that you guys mentioned, the relationships that we create, the networks that we create on our own can help a lot in closing that gap a little bit. Because if we're rooting for each other, then that's just gonna, hopefully be able to open up more doors for more of us to be included in a lot of industries that are underrepresented, that there are not that many Latinos. So I that was the first thought I had when how can we sort of overcome that system that plays over and over, especially in education and other industries. Does anybody else have a comment on that? Yeah. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, and then I'll be done. Just for whoever's watching, and maybe it's a white-led organization, tokenizing people is also a real thing. When I first got into the public land space over a decade ago, I was the young, articulate brown kid, right? And it helped me build relationships and it opened doors. But now, to Evie's note, we are really at a very exciting time to where we should take that next step. We should be extra entrepreneurial. We should maybe start our own organization that's Latino-led and Latino-focused to ensure that we're looking out for each other. I think we have the space, we have the time, and those with resources are looking to kind of play in that space. So just wanted to say, I think right now is the time to take big steps forward. Yeah.
And we have a question from Vanessa. Vanessa is asking, how can future generations achieve equal pay, especially immigrant parents that have the mindset of being thankful for any work and don't have negotiation experience?
I'll jump in. I have a quick thought about that coming from the polls, but I'm more interested in what the other panelists have to say. Is that I think, what we hear in the research is this acknowledgement of, look, my parents in the past had maybe fewer options, but the path for them was clearer. That if you work in this one job, you can make enough money, and that back in the day, some previous time, you could afford a small house on, a working class salary. And that nowadays, the cost of living for so many things, whether it's education, housing, healthcare, that the costs of all of these things have gone so through the roof that on the one hand, we now theoretically have so many more opportunities in our lives of different careers we can take, that we are not or should not be as funneled into, well, you have to work in one of these three sectors. But at the same time, the cost of everything that it takes to live and to feel financially secure has just gone up so far, but wages have not met that. And I think that's one of the core problems that millennials and Gen Zers are facing, is this tension between having so many more doors that appear open, but also such a higher bar for what we feel like we need to be earning and achieving and doing in order to keep our heads above water these days. And I think that's a unique challenge that our generation is facing that may look different than what our parents or grandparents did.
Absolutely. Does Evie or Angel have anything to add? I'll go with the next question. So DP is asking, what are our thoughts on Latino engagement in voting, especially in local elections and midterms? I mean, the young people showed up in the midterms last time around.
Very much so. So that's, I mean, the data on that was really fascinating because, look, coming at this from the polling perspective, when I am trying to figure out who a likely voter is when I'm doing a survey, the number one way I can tell if someone's a likely voter is, did they vote last time? That voting is a habit-forming behavior. Once you do it the first time, you have figured out, here's how I register, here's where my polling place is, here's how this works. You're more likely to participate in the future, which is why getting folks engaged that first time, it's such a high bar, teaching people, here's how you register, here's what you need, here's where your polling place is, et cetera. Once you clear that bar, people tend to vote a lot. And when you looked at data, election over election, 2014 versus 2018 midterms, turnout was up amongst all groups. People were just much more engaged in 2018 than they were in 2014. But the increase election over election was the highest among millennials by far. That millennials went from something closer to 25% turnout up to 40% turnout. And Gen Z, which this was their first midterm, they began participating close to 30% turnout, which was higher than where millennials had started. So you saw this huge shift, especially among young people, toward participation, which it means that they're very likely to continue participating. If you vote in a midterm, you vote in a presidential year. That's very likely. So I think we are going to see a higher proportion of voters in November, or votes are already beginning to be cast in some places, who are coming from the millennial generation and Generation Z. I think their voices are going to be heard louder than ever this November.
Yeah, and I mean, it cannot escape us that there's 1 million Latinos turning 18 every year for the next 10, 20 years. So that's the big power. Evie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I want to underscore that, right? Because I think as, this is like a focus on Hispanic and Latino voters. And we have always been a huge interest, right? Like everyone, like it's a really interesting place to be because we're so diverse in thought, diverse in demographics and location, and in thinking, right? Like the way that we all think is not the same. Like we don't just care about two issues, right? Like we don't just care about immigration. We care about many things, and that's driving us to the polls, right? And to your point, like there's so many more of us. So I think all eyes are on us. And I think the thing about young voters is that as I get older, I realize like there is almost this myth around the fact that we're not engaged. I think what we have to really battle this election cycle is what we have to be careful not to be so down and outs on whether it matters, because it does matter, right? Like, and that if you take nothing away from anything that I said today is that it does matter, and you have to vote, and then you have to run, right? Like I want you to run, right? Like if you are upset because the people you are trying to vote for don't represent you or don't represent everything that you believe, then it is your responsibility to replace them. So that's what I'll say about voting. But I hope that we have a large turnout in November.
Yeah, and I think we have time for one last question. And this one is from Annette. And Annette is asking, do younger Latinos, especially first and second generation, primarily identify with the Latino community, with their generation geographically, or with a socioeconomic class? So, because like you were saying, Evie, sometimes everybody gets lumped in under the Latino umbrella, and within that umbrella, there's so many nuances that can all on. Like there's not enough ways to identify. I don't know if Kristen, from the research perspective, have you find any trends as to aside from the Latino being Latino, is there any other ways first and second generation Latinos like to identify, whether it's geographically, socioeconomic status, or another identification?
I wish I had a satisfying answer based in data that I could give you, but it's a really interesting question that I actually have not seen restudied. I would be fascinated to see, given the incredible diversity of the Latino community, to what extent, I would also be really interested in to what extent people identify with the broader overall label, seeing themselves as Latino, or to what extent it's sort of within that, national origin, those sorts of questions. I don't have a good answer, but I would be fascinated to learn.
No, and I think that's like the one big question that comes up every time, especially around the election. How do you target Latinos? How do you speak to them? And a lot of that goes to that point. Who are you really talking to? I wanted to give you all a last chance to do closing comments. on any thoughts I didn't specifically ask you that you think it's important for folks listening in to keep in mind as they think about unlocking opportunities for future generations.
I'll take a quick stab at this. I mean, I think if I had to summarize everything that the research has shown me about what millennials and Generation Z very broadly, and I always hesitate to paint with such a broad brush because we know there's incredible diversity within millennials and Generation Z, and there are some places where they do differ, they have different approaches, but nonetheless, if I had to summarize the totality of what I've seen, it would be that in order to make sure that we can unlock the opportunity to achieve the American dream for everyone, we need to make sure that we're getting the foundations right so that people can build their dreams on top of a solid foundation. That means making sure that everyone has clean air and water, and that where we have discrepancies on that front and where there are some people for whom you cannot take for granted that when you turn on the tap, you're going to have clean water, or you cannot take for granted that when you walk outside, you'll have clean air to breathe. And that is fundamental and foundational. Similarly, the ability to gain education and the skills you need so that you can build that future. We need to recognize that if every child is born with incredible potential and then they enter a school system where for some that potential is not maximized, or their schools are not good or are not unlocking those doors, that needs to be fixed, or we're never going to be in a position where, you know, this American dream is truly accessible to everyone. So I think we need to make sure that we are laying a good foundation.
Angel, we have 2 minutes, so I'm gonna go with you and then quickly with Evie.
Okay, adelante. That's all that comes to mind. If you got energy, if you got a hustle, get involved. A strongly worded opinion letter or letter to the editor can really gain some attention and put not only you but your community in a trajectory that and could put everyone in a better place. So I'm gonna pass it over to Evie.
Thank you. So the two things I mentioned before: show up, vote, educate yourself on who you're voting for, and then you got to run, right? Like, you run for office so I can vote for you. And I think that the only third thing I would say is that we are in such a unique place right now, just in history. We may never see a state of emergency like this ever again when it comes to relooking at our education, environment, business, the economy. So, like, the time is now, right? Like, do what you can now to shape what tomorrow is going to look like. And I truly believe that we're the people that we've been waiting for. So cliche, but it's true.
I mean, we're showing up. We started to show up, and you know, like Kristen said, it really, I think, brought it home. You know, with the midterms example, you know, the best way to know if people are gonna continue to be engaged is seeing if they voted before, how they have engaged before. And as we see that pattern grow, then it just, I think, brings more hopes for the future and more opportunity ahead for you know, more of us to be able to engage and make decisions that affect our lives every single day. You know, be the ones that hold those barriers, break them, and move forward for a brighter future and access opportunity. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me in this conversation. It was wonderful. And thank you, everybody who was online, for listening in. Keep the conversation going on social media with hashtag CHCI2020.